Hi, this is Stephanie Sena, and welcome to my new show called Thinking Constellationally. This is the first 1 hour radio show in a series that I'll be doing here for USA LA Media, and I'm excited to be with you today. So, I will start by telling you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the show. This is Thinking Constellationally, where we connect the dots between systems of inequity and between ourselves and our neighbors. This show will highlight root causes of poverty and homelessness, what we need to do to overcome it, how poverty is connected to other systems of inequity, and how we can connect with our neighbors to build a stronger safety net. The show will also amplify voices from our community that experience poverty and homelessness, and voices of those on the front lines trying to fix the systems that produce it. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your interest in these issues of inequity and how we can overcome them. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but I also want to introduce you to my guest who's with us. We have a very special guest in the studio today. Her name is Alisha Robinson. Hi, Alisha. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I will tell you a little bit about what I have going on. I am a college professor at Villanova University. I've been teaching there since 2003. And I teach in a department called the Center for Peace and Justice. And this is a department at the university that is interdisciplinary, but all the professors, regardless of their backgrounds, teach from the perspective of how we can create a more just system. So I teach history courses on poverty, homelessness, revolutions, the history of these systems, and what we can do united to create a more fair country and world. I've been teaching this course for years. I love it so much. And in addition to that, I am the founder and executive director of an organization called Student Run Emergency Housing Unit of Philadelphia. We go by our acronym SREHUP. And this was an organization started in 2011 with college students from the entire Philadelphia region, with the idea that we would house our most vulnerable neighbors who were experiencing homelessness, partner with incredible service agencies throughout the city, and try to get these individuals into permanent housing. So we've been doing that in church basements since 2011. Right now, we're embarking on an incredible adventure, and I'm excited to bring you all along for it. We're building houses and increasing the inventory of affordable housing in Philadelphia for our neighbors who are below the poverty line, who are low income and have experienced homelessness. We're not just building housing, but community. In addition to that, we're building gardens and murals, community center, where we offer services people need to thrive. Our first community is in the Port Richmond section of Philadelphia. We're working on it right now, and you're welcome to jump in and be part of it. And we're calling it the Breaking Bread Community. So this is a project that's very exciting. It's all hands on deck. And we'll also be building tiny houses and talking about how we need to build with the idea of sustainability and environmentalism. To offset some of our crisis we're in with climate change. And I'm going to be talking about this weekly, so you will hear all about it. But in addition to talking about this project and how you can be involved, I also want to, as I mentioned, highlight the voices of people who have been really on the margins and struggling with poverty and homelessness. I think that we need to highlight their voices and really believe them and listen to what they've experienced and use their voices to help motivate us to do better. So with that in mind, I have Alisha with us today. And Alisha, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your how we came to meet.
How did we come to meet? We met, I will always say, through the grace of God, because I don't know you. I never met you. I've never heard of you. And it was just a moment in my life that my husband and myself, we found ourselves homeless. We had a dog, my baby Milo, and I had to make a choice between keeping my dog with me in order to keep us together, or to put my dog up, surrender to the shelter in order for myself and my husband to try to find emergency housing. When we decided that that was the road that we were going to have to choose because we exhausted all of our searching options, we gave the dog away to the shelter, and through the surrender application that you submit when you give your dog away, a lady called me and she said, I want to let you know that we received your paper, we have your dog, and I want you to call a lady named Stephanie Sena. And I said, okay. And she said, she knows about you. She knows you're going to call. Please just call her. And I said, wow, my God, okay. So I told my husband, I said, honey, something amazing is happening. They have our dog. We're going to be able to be reunited. You know, they're not going to let my dog be put down. And we have to meet with her. And she said that, you know, they're going to help us. So I came, I called, I came over, and I met you.
You
I
came
mean,
over.
do we need to know the whole story?
And you can talk about whatever you feel comfortable with. But I love if you could talk a little bit about what you were expecting versus what you found when you came over.
So, you know, we had exhausted all of our options for trying to, you know, find a room, trying to stay with family. We did all of those things. And when the lady called and said, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pull your dog to the side and we're going to have you meet with Stephanie. She is the, you know, chairperson, the head honcho lady of Srihub. And I said, oh, Lord. My husband's first instinct was to be, are we having to go to a shelter? Do we have to go to the shelter? I said, I don't know, but the lady said, come to my house. I said, oh, goodness. I had to make sure I looked good. Like, oh, my God, I have to be presentable. If she's the head person, she must have money. She must have, like, this beautiful house that when you come in, it's white sofas, that's just the sofa room that you look at things and you don't really sit there. And, you know, she might be in her office because she said, you know, I'm in the middle of a conference call, but just come in and sit down. And I'm thinking, oh, good. She's probably going to go like wave to me and say, just sit right there. And when I came in, it wasn't like that. It was like I was going over a friend's house and she's like, girl, don't worry about the things going on over there. You know, just come on in, come sit down, let's eat. It was such a feeling like I didn't have to put up that guard. Like I could just be me and I could share. And it's brought us so many different places and so many good places. So
that night was really powerful for me too, Alisha. It was incredible to meet you and your husband Corey. This was right after Thanksgiving, I think, last year. It was cold out, and I remember you telling me that you had been sleeping outside on the benches with the dog, and that you took your dog to ACT, the city's animal shelter, because you felt that it might have been too cold to sleep outside with Milo, and you were concerned about Milo's health being outside in the freezing cold like that. And what struck me, Alisha, is that you seemed so much more concerned about Milo than yourself. That you were willing to forego your own comfort for your dogs. And when I spoke to Kim, who you had met at the shelter, she was touched by that too. That when you were surrendering your dog or trying to surrender your dog, you were crying, and you were so upset. I know. I didn't mean to make you cry, Alisha,
go ahead.
It's very it's a traumatic experience. Do you still have the letter that you got from ACT?
I do. I didn't bring it with me. I have it put away.
Okay.
But it was definitely, anyone who knows me knows that I love my babies, my animals. I have two now, but at that time I had one, and they know that they're my babies. I treat them like my kids. My husband and myself, we don't have children, so they're the next best thing to having a kid. You know, I protect them. I'm their voice. My husband says, you should be a lawyer because I just go to bat for the dog. The dog can do no wrong. And it was a choice between the fact that where are we going to put our dog when we have to go to work? You know, like, it's like, where are you going to put your kid when you have to go to work? We can do it. We can survive like that. We can try to make the best of it, but you have something, a living creature that's like depending on you to be warm, and where am I going to bring? I can't go into every store. Like, it was just a whole process. It hurt because that was my emotional support. That was what gave me comfort, and I told my husband, I said, in a matter of all the chaos, that was my one peace that I had, that it didn't matter how bad my day was, that I would still have my dog. And so, yeah, I had to make that choice, and it was really, really hard. But I really went in with, when I surrendered my dog, to make sure that I try to put as much good information, and I was also worried because my dog it was a Chihuahua. So they're known to be ankle biters. They're always the ones that get a little snippy sometimes. And he was like that. So I was worried that that was going to be an automatic reason for them to put him down. And when I put the honesty on the paper, when I got the surrender sheet, which is your confirmation that you surrender your rights to your dog, you no longer have any say so as to where the dog goes. But there was a chance, and it was weird. It was like 35 to a 51% chance that your dog will be put down. So it was like I was doing a gamble as to what I was going to do. So when I was reached and they told me, this is what we're going to do, your dog is going to be fine, it was like, my baby,
Yeah.
I'll do whatever I have to do.
Amazing. So I want to give a little context to the experience that you went through. So in the United States today, about 70% of us have pets. And in fact, more children in the United States are being raised with pets than fathers. Yeah. So we are a country where we love our animals, and in fact, they're our family members and they're our best friends. And if you are listening and you think about I'm sure 70% of people who are listening to this right now can relate, and this feeling of having to give up your pet, potentially to have the pet killed, is heartbreaking. That's your best friend and sometimes only companion. In the United States today, over 30% of all animals that are surrendered to shelters are euthanized. They are killed. That's a number I don't think that we can be okay with.
That's very sad.
Yeah. And, in a lot of countries that's illegal. They don't euthanize animals in many countries. The United States is one of the only ones that does that. So when you went and received this letter saying that there was a high chance that Milo would be put down, I know you weren't okay with that. And so Kim reached out to me and said, let's help them get housing, and maybe we can get Milo fostered for a short period of time until we can get you and your husband Corey back into a living situation. And I said, we're going to do whatever it takes. The reason Kim reached out to me is because I've become a little known in the region for offering shelter to people who have pets, and that's not usual in this country, and especially not on the East Coast. So most shelters don't allow pets in, and I've been running shelter, as I mentioned, since 2011, and we were in church basements. And there were rules that we were renting the space and we weren't allowed to have animals in. So people would come to the door regularly, freezing cold night. It's below freezing and snowing out, and people would come with their dogs and they would say, I need to be, I want to be, seek shelter, and I'd have to turn them away. But when I did that, I recognized there was nowhere for them to go. And so we said, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. We can save humans and animals at the same time, and that's really the only humane thing to do. So we're trying to be low barrier and let people in with their pets and make sure that people don't have to be separated from them. So I wanted to share the context of what you're going through. And I'm sure that people listening, especially if they live in the city or frequent the city, they see this image a lot of people on the streets with their animals. And generally what's happening is that people are living in housing with their pets. There's a very high rate of eviction. In Philadelphia and throughout the country, there's kind of some myths around eviction. And in essence, if there's a landlord who owns a few properties, it's very difficult for them to get a tenant evicted. It's a very lengthy and costly system. However, most of the housing stock in Philadelphia and throughout the country, they're owned by these major corporations and conglomerates, and the eviction process is actually automated. And it's sometimes cheaper to evict than to have a tenant who falls behind on a payment stay in the housing. And so these corporations, where they own most of the housing stock, the tenants are not people, they're numbers. And the eviction process is not emotional, it's just a matter of math, and it's fast. And so the average cost people are becoming evicted in throughout the country is only for falling behind in rent by $750. For that amount of cost, somebody can fall on hard times, they can get sick, or be caring for a sick parent, which I see all the time. And then before they know it, they've fallen behind in rent and can easily become evicted. Once evicted, they're evicted with their pets, and they find it nearly impossible to get housing again once they have an eviction on their record. And this is creating an epidemic of homelessness that I think we really need to, as a country, decide who we are as a people. And if we're going to allow in this country with so much wealth, so many of us to live and die on the streets, many of us with our pets, I think that that's not who we are and that's not who we want to be. So I'm heartened by the community that has come around, and there's been so many people who have been part of your journey. And who have reached out to help. Everyone from Peggy Jackson, who fostered Milo, and and John DeFrancis, who helped with getting you in an Airbnb and searching for housing for you. Kim, who connected you to me. There were a lot of people along the way, but I want to say this very clearly, that you touched us as well, Alisha, that these were the gifts of your own soul and your heart, and we could all see your soul and your heart. And so this was not a top-down thing where we took pity on somebody who was struggling. You are part of our village and our community, and you're valued and valuable, and we love you. And so we just care for people like that. We just want to create a safety net so that people are not in these situations like you and Corey were, and Milo, on the streets on Thanksgiving, sleeping on benches. And I know when you were out there, one thing that struck me, Alisha, is that on that first night we met, you didn't talk much about you and your own experiences and your own pain. You talked about how many other people you saw out there on the benches. That struck me.
It was really hard to see.
I'm sure it was overwhelming.
It was. And to see them in the similar situation, you don't know their story. You don't know why they're there. They don't know why we're there. But when we walked through and we were trying to figure out a place for us to settle for the night, there were other people there. It was like they already had their spot laid out. Everybody kind of left each other alone. This was the time to, to go to sleep. And it was heartbreaking. This is what this in my own personal life, this was me feeling like this is what it's come to.
Yeah. So we only have a couple seconds left, and we're going to pick back up with that after the break. Thank you, Alisha.
All right.
Okay.
Do we have a break?
We do.
I'm going to get some water.
Oh,
is
you
there
want some
water here?
I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. And even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, Maria, and she convinced me to continue my education. She just never judges. She's a true role model.
From the depths of my heart, I thank you, Maria, for being a friend and a beautiful person. No one receives a diploma alone, and I'm honored to share this moment with you. Thank you.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Okay, thank you so much. We're back again with Alisha Robinson, who's talking to us about her experiences when she was sleeping on park benches last year around Thanksgiving. Alisha, the last thing you said to me really stuck out. You said that when you saw all of these people who were sleeping on park benches, that your heart went out to them. And you said something that struck me. You said you didn't know their stories and they didn't know yours. But what's important to understand is that they do all have stories, right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's vital. My project, when I started with Villanova students, and it quickly expanded to include students from all the local universities, including Penn and Drexel, Swarthmore, Temple, and PCOM. Basically, we were having a shortage of shelter beds in Philadelphia when we opened in 2011. There had been a shift in federal funding away from homeless shelters and towards permanent housing vouchers, which ended up not being the solution everybody has hoped it would be for a bunch of reasons that I'm excited to discuss on this show. But one of the main problems is that the gateway to getting a housing voucher was through the shelter. So funding shifted in 2008. So basically, prior to that, there was a ton of, not a ton at all, but there was funding for homeless shelters. And then based on some academic research put out by Penn and Dennis Colhane in the early 2000s, where he said it is far less expensive to house somebody than to let them live and die on the streets and in shelters, with all the costs associated with staying in a homeless shelter and the costs associated mostly with going to the ER over and over again, that it is far less expensive for the taxpayer, not to mention more humane, to give somebody housing. And this is all accurate. The problem was that in order to get a housing voucher to subsidize your offset the cost of housing, you had to go into the shelter. So at the same time, money wasn't added to this pot of money for homeless eradication. It was diverted from shelters to the housing voucher, but then saying you have to go to the shelter to get a voucher. So all of a sudden, it's putting this massive strain on shelters. And there were people who were living in substandard housing conditions. They were doubled up with family members or living in situations that were not tenable. And they moved to the shelter with the hope of getting the voucher. But the shelter at the same time is becoming defunded. So that's where in 2011 we enter. And the Ridge Shelter, which was Philadelphia's biggest shelter, was closing that same winter due to budget cuts. And so we came on to open shelter beds in a context of beds closing, knowing that we could not allow our neighbors to die on the streets. So we did that, but also I teach history at Villanova for years, and I was teaching about issues of global poverty. And my students were so divorced from that reality. So really, these are students who, majority of them came from suburban private high schools, and now we're going to a suburban private college. And some of them had never even been to the city, and many of them had never even seen homelessness. So I could talk until I was blue in the face about the problems affecting people who are on the streets, but it was divorced from the reality, and they could look out the window and see the landscaping, millions of dollars spent on the landscaping of this university. And it's not real. It's not there. It's a plastic bubble they live in. And I felt like I needed to get them out of the classroom, and we have to get proximal with people. These are really our neighbors. Philadelphia is our neighboring city, and I believe universities have an obligation to give back to the communities that house them. And so Villanova is really great at students taking mission trips to Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras over break, and they build a library, and then they come back and they change their Facebook profile picture to them and a poor kid in Guatemala. But doesn't create kind of a lasting relationship with the people in Guatemala. It doesn't create a sense of these students from this wealthy school in Villanova in Philadelphia having any sense of the causes of poverty in Guatemala or the obstacles to overcoming that poverty, and more so how the decisions that my Villanova students are making in terms of what they consume and the political figures they support, how those decisions affect those communities in Guatemala. There's a divorce from that reality. So for me, I said, we don't need to go to Guatemala. We can go to our own backyard. Absolutely. And we can help our neighbors who are struggling, but not for a week, ongoing, weekly, for weeks on end, because I think that you need to create community, and that's not fast. That's not a one and done, I went and I served a meal.
Absolutely.
That is sitting with people and breaking bread with them and creating community and hearing their stories. And then from that experience, learning what needs to be done in solidarity with those who are suffering. So I think there's a tendency in our Western civilization to want to give aid. It's very top down. It's this idea of like, I'm here to save you. It's the white savior complex. And people who are not who are not suffering from the problem, thinking they know best how to help others. And I want to disrupt that narrative and say, you don't know best. You don't know anything. You need to sit with those in their struggle and learn from them and use your resources based on their knowledge and their interests and their needs. So the thing is that we changed and we learned from the stories of the individuals we met. And so when you said all these people had stories, I know they do. And once these Villanova students, and not just Villanova, but as I mentioned, students throughout the region, come and they break bread and they hear stories, it's harder for them to ignore others on the street because they know this could be another Tyrone. This could be another Jay. And what is this? I always think when I see somebody on the street, I wonder, like, what are their talents? Are they a good hugger? What does their laugh sound like? What makes them cry? I always wonder, like, what it was like on the day that they were born. And I try to imagine, that hospital room. And I try to imagine doctors saying, like, welcome to the world. Here you are. And that baby having so much potential.
Absolutely.
And when we see people, really see them, I think it changes the dynamic completely. And I see you, Alisha, and I could tell that you were someone who saw other people and cared deeply about other people. And so even from day one, when I said, I'm going to help you, Alisha, it was this understanding you're going to pay it forward, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
you're going to be with us, because we all at some point in our lives need help. Right? And it takes, I think, a tremendous amount of courage and bravery to ask for that help. I've been there before, and I know that, you have to swallow your pride, which is really hard to do. And it's to put yourself in an incredibly vulnerable position. I know that. I've been there. And so, I think that it's important that we understand that this is a circle, right? And we support others when they need it, and then they come back and support others, and so we're now building gardens and houses, and you're going to be there with us for that whole process.
Yes, I will.
I can't wait.
It really is, honestly, for me, my way of repaying, because I'm not a rich woman. If I had the money to just give back everything that you gave me, then it would be okay. I would feel like, I repaid. Okay, you helped me, I helped, and I gave you back the whatever but I can't do that. I'm not in a position to do that. my goal was to just get back on my feet. And with me being able to do that, I can take the time and give back through other ways that are not monetary, which would be volunteering my time and giving back to other people, because I too was in that position that they're in, and all I needed was a hand. So it was really important for me to be able to do that and continue to do that. I was born knowing that my mother taught me, you give to the community. My mother was deeply involved in the community. You know, she worked in the food bank. She was out there giving food drives and feeding the homeless and bringing them gloves. And this was all something that was in me. But when I fell on hard times, it was very hard for me to get back up. It wasn't a immediate, okay, let's just go help them out. So when I did receive the help, it was all on God's time. It fell into place. I met the right people. And it made me also feel like if these people are helping me, then I should be able to give back. I have many talents. So sure, just like you say, you don't know what that person's talents are. You don't. If you strike up a conversation with them, you might even know their name, because most of them, you see them on the street, you don't even know their name. Nowhere on those little cardboard papers say, "Hi, my name is."
Wow, that's I hadn't thought about that. You're right. I've never seen a poster with somebody's name on it. I mentioned this in one of the TED Talks I gave, but sometimes people on the streets can go days or months or even years without hearing their own name called.
Or eye contact. I'm on the train and people are asking for money or food or whatever it may be. And if I have it, I always tell my husband, he says, do you want to give them something? I said, if we have it, we give. If we don't have it, then we're just not going to have it together. But I do my very best to give them eye contact and say, I'm sorry, I don't have anything to give you. But I feel as though if I can at least look them in their eye, then they're a person, because that's got to be really hard to come to that level, to beg for food or money on a train. Whatever they're going to do with it, but it's just that physical act of doing that. You see them, they become numb. Some of them just hold a sign and don't even talk. I don't know that guy's name.
Alisha, that's amazing. And I totally agree with you. My goodness, you have such an incredible heart. I'm so grateful that you're in my life, Alisha. But I have people ask me frequently, like when I see somebody on the streets asking for money, what should I do? And I often tell people that what I do is if I have money to give, I will. Most often I don't. Because I don't have a lot of means either. But I always say that the most important thing is to make eye contact. And to acknowledge somebody. And I do the same thing. If I don't have something, I'll say, I'm so sorry, I don't have anything. I think that so many people don't know what to do, and they're embarrassed about this situation, or they feel this is awkward, so they ignore people. They step over them and pretend not to see it.
Yes.
And that happens to people all the time, and it can be an eroding of someone's soul, and it can destroy hearts before the cold will destroy a body. But so I always say, if you don't have anything to give, just make eye contact or say hello, or strike up a conversation if you have the time. That's so vital and important. And people say to me, well, if I give money, I don't know where they're going to use it. They might use it on drugs. And for me, I feel like I don't like that conversation, because I don't want to put myself, it feels very paternalistic to put myself in this position of judging somebody else and being a lie detector and kind of figuring out what they do with it. If I have the money, I'm going to give it, and I'm not going to think twice about what they spend it on.
Exactly.
But sometimes I'll make things. I one time I was really sick, and after I got sick, I celebrated getting better by going out and making little blessing bags to give out, filled with hand sanitizer and deodorant and some food, and I put it all in my car with the idea that my children and I would go around and give it out on the streets to people who were hungry. And the next day, the car was broken into, and somebody took all those bags. There were about 100 bags, and I was devastated. And so upset that somebody would do that. And then the very next day, my car was broken into again. But this time, the bags were put back. But they were put back with just the peanut peanut butter sandwiches that I had in there. Everything else was taken out except the peanut butter sandwiches. And I thought that was so interesting. I was wondering if this was like a thief with a peanut allergy, that they took everything, but they returned the peanut butter sandwiches. But even then I was like, well, whoever it was needed it more, and they must have needed it more. But I think that it makes more sense now when you tell me this story about your mom and how she taught you about community. That you are a legacy. You honor her legacy. And I think that often I've fallen on hard times too. I've been very sick. I've spent years in and out of the hospital with sepsis. I've had since 2016 5 different bouts of sepsis, and I've had multiple amputations. I had my last one was last November. I was actually, I think I must have been.
I think you just came home.
Yeah, from the hospital when you came over. I had just, when we met, I had just had a transmetatarsal amputation, so half my foot removed. And I'm in and out of it. I'm in a boot right now, and I'm in and out of one frequently. But I have struggled. I owe about $100,000 to the hospitals. Which is also something we'll talk about later on in other episodes of this show, is the cost of our healthcare system, which is absolutely tragic. But the only reason that I have survived all of that is the safety network that supported me, is the community that supported me. And so I think that we can all relate to falling on many of us can relate to falling on hard times and struggling with paying our bills. I have had to struggle with keeping my electricity on and with supporting my 2 kids. When you came to my house, the first few times I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment that I shared with my 2 children, who one of them had to sleep in bed with me because there was no space. The only thing that kept me from the streets is this network of people who helped me. And I think sometimes that's all it takes is a safety net. It's the difference between life or death sometimes. So for me, I say we've got to tighten that net and make it more abundant and more accessible to people who might not ordinarily have that safety net, or their community doesn't have the resources to support them when they fall on hard times. So you and I was part of your safety net, and you're going to be part of the safety net that catches other people.
That's my plan.
Yeah, I love it. So I think that's interesting that, your context and how you come to it. But I, too, was taught from my mom and volunteered from a very young age, but with this perspective that we are all one. I was raised Jewish, and in Judaism there is a Hebrew phrase called, in Hebrew it's tikkun olam, and the translation of that is repair the world. And to me, sitting in Hebrew school and sitting in Sunday services, like that was what touched me, is that we are all called upon, I think, no matter what your religion, to try to heal our world in whatever way we can. And I personally believe that starts in our own backyard. Sometimes if the newspaper prints that I'm a Villanova professor doing this, people assume I don't live in Philly, that I'm an outsider. They say, like, what is this mainliner coming in? They don't recognize that I myself am an adjunct professor I get paid in hugs, which are great, except that my landlord doesn't accept hugs as payment. I've tried. So, but I live in Philly, and this is actually my district and my neighborhood, and I care about my neighbors. So we're going to take another short break, but I'm excited to come back and talk a little bit more. Thank you so much, Alisha.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We have one more segment.
My mom was not.
I came out in the 11th grade. If you're even nobody was embracing getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh, man. The selfies.
Selfie. Nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on, man. Let's split a ride home.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Okay, thanks. And we're back now. During that short break, Alicia, you started telling me a little bit of a story about your mom. Can you tell us a little bit more about your mom and what she was like and what she went through?
My mom was an amazing person. So anyone who knew my mother, her name is Louisa Conroy. If you ever have crossed her path, she was just such a warm-hearted person, funny, creative, and talented. But my mother was not a well woman. So it just kind of resonates with me when you talk about how you're going through your medical issues. And it just brings me to that space because my mother was not a well woman. She had suffered from many different medical conditions, you know, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, asthma. She was always in and out the hospital, always. You know, she had journals full of all of her different types of, you know, allergies and different tests that she's done. She was thorough. She wrote everything down. But she wasn't a well woman, and she never let that stop her from doing what she wanted to do. She said, you know, I know that my time on earth is limited, but when, you know, no matter what these doctors say, it's up to the good Lord above to decide when I'm taking my last breath. So until then, I'm going to keep pushing. And she did. She was involved in the community. She did the food bank, book bag drives, feeding the homeless. It was just who she was. She lived in church. Anybody who knew her, she lived in church, and she was there even when she didn't have to be. That was just her piece where she would go and she would be in the office, you know, tinkering on the keyboard. But it just really does resonate with me when you talk about your journey, you know, and how no matter what you're going through, it's still a driving force for you that it's not stopping you. Okay, so I'm missing half my foot. Okay, so this is how we're going to live life now. Okay, but we're going to keep moving forward. I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. And it makes me very proud to be a person in your life.
Well, I'm sure that your mom is looking down on you with so much pride now, Alicia. I'm
pray.
sure that you make her incredibly proud. But the story of your mother resonates with me. You said that, you know, she had an enlarged heart.
Yes.
And,
So my mother, yes, through her high blood pressure, she had to get a defibrillator implanted. She had what they called sudden cardiac death. So at any point in time, her heart could stop.
Wow.
So she really did live her life that way. And it caused, the high blood pressure caused for her heart to be enlarged. So my mother said, you know, amongst other funny things that she would say, she would honestly come and say, well, if that's how God is going to take me out, then I'm going to die from a big heart.
I love that.
And it just was like, what do you say to your mother when she says that? Like, oh, like, that's just so touching. You know, that's how you're going to go. Unfortunately, she did, you know, pass, and it was suddenly, you know, so it did happen. But I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not just your
Oh, I don't wanna
loss, but I'm
cry.
sorry for all of our collective loss that I feel like we, as a community, lost her too. Because when you talk about her, I feel like I can picture her, that I know her, and I think she lives through you.
I look very similar to her.
I bet.
So,
Oh, I
yes.
would have loved her too, Alicia. But I'm sure, and you know, her legacy lives on through you. I think that you embody the things that she stands for, and she taught you. And you know, my mom is the same. My mother sounds very similar to your mother, so I think we were probably cut from the same cloth, Alicia.
Awesome.
But I can also relate that, you know, I've been incredibly sick. I'm somebody without a lot of resources, financial resources or health resources, and I do feel like that. Even if I don't have a lot, this work keeps me going. It really is what helps me get out of bed on my hardest days, and is probably responsible for my, you know, for keeping me as long as I've alive as long as I've lived. When I was in the hospital, I was at Penn, and I was in for weeks and weeks with sepsis, infection in my blood that was spreading into my organs, and I was hooked up to IVs and surgery after surgery, and it was really not looking good. And I saw every specialist imaginable, and then my main doctor, Dr. Brofman, who I love, he's the head of infectious disease at Penn, but he brought in a psychiatrist to talk to me. Just he thought it would be a good idea if I talked to somebody and maybe had a little check-in to see how my mental health was doing through all of this. And she came in and I said, you know, surprisingly, I'm not that depressed, you know, despite all that I'm going through. And we talked about it, and there's this like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically, I didn't have some of the bottom, you know, building blocks of your hierarchy of needs. I didn't have like the basic things you need, such as your health. But I had the top, which is like self-actualization. Like I knew what I was meant to do, and it provided me with a ton of meaning, and it really kept me from going into some very dark places. So this work, it's challenging. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I am a mother. I've given birth, and I feel like you know, this project is like giving birth. You know, but it's real, and I think women are some of the strongest creatures in the world. And I'm grateful to have a strong network of women who have my back and who are part of this network. So it's not easy. This is a constant struggle and challenge, but it keeps me from falling into the abyss. And two, also, you know, I think that many of us have a sense that everything's broken. Right? It's hard to like listen to the news today, and so much is devastating all around us, and we hear it constantly. And sometimes we get almost addicted to this news cycle. It's hard to turn it off. Like if we miss it for a second, we don't know what we're going to miss, right? Because it's all happening so quickly. You know, and it's like the impeachment stuff, and you know, did you hear about the woman who was shot through her window by the cop the other day? You know,
In Puerto Rico,
yeah.
they had a shooting, 600 gun shells.
Oh my goodness, terrible! It's nonstop, and it's so easy to feel like numb and overwhelmed, and like it's all so chaotic, and there's nothing I can do. But I think the antidote to that feeling is rolling up your sleeves and working in your neighborhood and building gardens and houses. And it's not solving homelessness or poverty. I always say this is not the solution. The solution is to work on policy changes, because if you're going to solve poverty, you have to solve inequity. People like to talk about poverty because they think, oh, that's easily solvable. I'll just throw money at it. But the problem is not lack of resources. It's the unfair distribution of those resources, and the fact that the top 1% owns 90% of the world's resources is not okay. And we need to address that. So I'm always quick to say I could build a ton of houses. It's not going to solve the problem. It might solve the problem for some individuals who are suffering. And so that will do it because we want to save as many people as we can. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to the problem. In Philadelphia alone, We have a quarter of the population living below the poverty line. It's about 400,000 people who at any moment could become homeless. And we need to do something about that. And no housing I could build or gardens or murals will fix that. But in doing this work, in connecting with our neighbors, we are preparing ourselves to do that harder work of changing the system. And we are lessening the divide that we have with our neighbors. We are building community, and that community is what will prepare us to do the bigger, harder work of changing the inequity that we see all around us. And so I really feel like, this is what helps me on my darkest days to keep going. Alisha, can you give us a little bit of context about like where you and Corey are now compared to where you were last year?
It's funny because on October 12th, that marked the beginning of our journey because that was the last day that we had in our home. From there, the turn of events have brought us here a year later now. We're doing very well. Corey's working. I'm working. I do part-time work. And Corey's working tirelessly. I guess that's the word for it.
He works at Wawa.
He does. He works at Wawa down on 6th and Chestnut. And he's doing so good there. We're in just such a different space. The mind frame is different. Like, this affected everything, not just a roof over the head. It really did affect your mental health when you went through this. It was a lot for me for a long time. I think I still have boxes that I haven't unpacked yet because I'm just still scared. Like, at any point, I'm going to have to just pack up. And it's not the case. Nowhere near that. But it's just that fear that, okay, and all the things that we've lost, that it's like now that I'm unpacking, I'm like, oh, I don't have that anymore. Oh, I don't have it anymore. But we're doing so much better. We're happy. We have our apartments. It's close to transportation for us, so that way we can get to and from. There's no reason to not be able to get anywhere. We've been able to continue having good communication with Miss Peggy. So I'm always chit-chatting with her in regards to the animal side. With Philly's pets needing to be either put into foster care or put into, from the shelter, put into maybe some rescues. Mr. John, he hates it when I call him that. John, he's awesome.
I love him.
He's always looking out for us, just if anything new pops up as far as
He's a beautiful soul.
Progressing. He's always wanting you to do better. That's his whole goal. So he'll take you under his wing, and that's been really awesome. And he's took us under his wing, as well as his other partner right there, Miss Marisol. She's out there, but she's also a driving force behind him because she supports him in a lot of things that she does. So it's been a new family. So being able to see you and see you progress, and it's just been an all around positive movement. Like, we went from being so low to like slowly getting back to a new place, but it's just even better.
Amazing. Well, you look, like you're a ray of sunshine, and it makes me so happy to see you on the other side of that, because I also saw you on, in your darkest moments. But even then, you were still a ray of sunshine.
I try. It's hard. It's
I
not
know it
easy.
is. I know.
I really think that the people that make you laugh the most are the ones that are hurting the most inside, because it's just a way to deflect that. So my smiles, I have to laugh to keep from crying. I know. But it has been an amazing journey, and it just makes me want to do more. Like, I'm really trying to find my purpose, and I feel like I'm being led in awesome direction. So I'm going with it, and wherever it leads me because I feel like I'm on a positive, good path, not negative, nothing that's bringing me down. So
incredible. Well, you are truly an inspiration, and I said from day one when I met you, you're never getting rid of me. I keep saying that.
I answer every time you call, so no worries.
You do, and it's incredible, the community that we're building together. And I'm so grateful that I invited you, that I had you over for dinner. I know that it was a vulnerable place for you to be. I think I showed up in pajamas that day.
Yes, onesie.
Well, a onesie? What, cow onesie maybe?
Well, cow onesie.
Oh my goodness! I showed up in pajamas.
She kept it 100, as we say.
I did. But what people when they're homeless are in such a vulnerable place. I love bringing them over and us just sitting around the table and breaking bread together. It I think brings the level of stress down.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Alisha, for joining us today.
I
love you, and I love
you too.
you sharing your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for hearing my story.
Okay. Is that okay? I feel the timer went off and I was like, "Ooh, I should have said like more wrap up or something," but I'll get better at that. This was my first one.